Hello. So you just bought a bunch of tubes. Maybe you got them from a garage sale, a ham fest, an estate, who knows. You got a bunch of nice tubes. They're all in reasonably clean boxes. How can you tell if they're new or not? Well, today we're going to do some tube farming. Yes, it's separating the chaff from the wheat and making sure your new-in-the-box tubes are really new in the box. I'll just go over some quick tips and things like that. There are a million of them, but these tips are kind of the basics. So you can tell if the tube that's in the box is what is written on the box. Let's start. Of course, you know this, the butter knife. This is how you properly open tubes. If you don't know how, go back in my videos and check out my video on how to open tubes. This is the proper way. Butter knife, slip it under, and open. You don't rip the box. Anyway, these tubes here are not indeed random. They're examples I picked out so I could show you the different aspects of doing this. So let's start. Okay, RCA 6CG8A. First rule is, well, make sure it's the right number and the right brand. 6CG8A, RCA, that's ought to be what's in there, right? Let's see what's in there. Well, it is indeed a 6CG8A, but look, it's branded Gonset. So this is not, well, it might be a new tube, but you can't trust it. So in my book, it's a used tube. Maybe it has 0 hours on it, but you know what? It's a used tube in my book. This really has to be an RCA in an RCA box. I think that's self-explanatory. 50L6GT RCA. Let's check this out. All right, well, it's a 50L6. It's RCA, but it's used. And you can tell that by, you can see up here some staining. And this happens to tubes. It's over its lifetime. Some stray electrons and metal vapor or whatever that is gets coated on some places where it kind of squirts out of the cathode. Yeah, sometimes some types of new tubes do exhibit this just from the burn-in process, but mostly it's a used tube thing. 50L6s should be relatively clean on top there. So, you know what? Used tube. RCA. I like RCA. 6R7. Let's check this out. RCA 6R7. Well, guess what? This is indeed a new tube. Metal tubes, look at that. It should be nice, unchipped. Sometimes they get rusty, even though they're new, if they've been in a damp environment. I don't like rusty tubes, so I tend to pitch them. But that's what a new metal tube should look like. RCA box, RCA printing, everything's appropriate. Moving on to a SN7GTB. Well, it's kind of rough looking, isn't it, the box? Faded. Let's open it up. Tab missing. Well, no, I guess it's just bent down in there. Well, sure enough, it looks okay. Now, one thing with octals, one sign to look for in used tubes, use this as a pointer. If you look straight down in that crack between the base and the glass, many used tubes will start showing crud in there, dust and grease, but a new tube, it should look really clean. I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but you should be able to see right down into that crack. You might see some glue eventually, but for the most part, it should be nice and clean. So that's a new tube. Switch over to a Westinghouse. Why not? I've opened the wrong end. Well, here's another trick. Sometimes with octals, you don't know which side the tube really wants to come out to. Really quick, if you're doing a bunch of octal, a really quick trick to learn is put your finger in the middle and the base end falls down. The base end is heavier. So once you learn how to do that very easily, if you're checking out a tube farming, a bunch of metal octals, easy to find out. Balance it on your finger at the midpoint, and the base will fall to the side or the end you can open. And look at that. Nice, clean Westinghouse. New tube. Okay, now sometimes with the tube makers, like RCA, Sylvania, most tube makers actually, they changed box styles. You can see here, newer RCA, older RCA. This switch happened roughly around 1970 or so, maybe late 60s. But there was a transition period. So sometimes you'll see old-looking tubes in new boxes. Here's the new type of box with the new blocky type logo. New tube. Pins are nice and clean. New tube. Let's look at this 6JH8. All right, this is a transitional one. New style box, old style printing. However, it's completely legitimate. Once again, you know, the tube is nice and clean. Printing's pretty nice too. Occasionally you'll get printing that's a little worn off, especially if you have a tube that's been bouncing around in the back of a truck for 15 years. Sometimes it rubs against the inside of the cardboard, and gets a little faded and such like that. But the printing's there, nice there. New tube. But this is one of the transition types. Here is the old style box with the old style printing. New tube. Boring tube, 6JH8 or 6JH6, boring tube. Maybe someone will love it up someday. But sometimes things can fool you. Here's a 6HF8. Okay, new style box, old style printing, but probably won't be able to see this because it's very faint. The date code right there, the tip of the knife, 1963. This tube is way too old for this style box. Remember what I said. This change happened right around 1970 or something like that. 63 tube. That's not going to be that's not going to be a new tube. It may look new, and certainly it kind of does, but nope, that date code kind of kills it for it. So used tube. Okay, some Sylvanias, and they also went through a box transformation. But here's another tip. Notice red printing, black printing. Now, this had to do with the, not licensing, but the warranties and such like that. The Sylvania tubes with red printing should have red printing on the tube. Let's see if this does. Sure enough, it does. If that was another color, that would not be an original tube. Let's take a look at this one. Black printing. Should have normal printing on the tube. Nope, this one's got red printing too. This is telling me this tube is not original to this box. If it was, that would be in red. Now, if this was the original tube, this would probably be in yellow, maybe sometimes white. So, used tube. GE had something similar. This underline here. Sometimes there was a symbol, but a lot of times it's an underline. This is also a warranty thing. And this should be a red printed tube. Sure enough, it is. Line, it's kind of an underline thing. Sometimes it varies a little bit in style, but it will be a line of sorts. Red printing, should have red printing. But like this one, the 6X4, it's got the line, so it should have red printing. What do we have? We have a tube that doesn't want to come out. White printing. Not an original tube to this box. Maybe unused, who knows? But I can't call this an original tube to this box. This rule of thumb is literally kind of a rule of thumb. There probably were some exceptions to this rule, but these rules, these hints I'm kicking out here for you, they'll cover probably 95% or more. So here's a GE 6J4, faded, probably been in the sun, probably been on my Hamfest table. No line. What's it look like? White printing. Now another thing, you'll notice this one says Canada here. If you see that and you want to double check, look on the box. Hey, it says made in Canada. It says made in USA and it has a Canadian tube in it. Not an original tube. Sometimes it'll say tube marked as for country of origin or something like that. Which case, you know, it's kind of a wild card there. But generally, if it says made in USA, it should be a US made tube. And it should say that on the tube. Okay, well, like I said, these are some basic rules and such like that you can use when sorting tubes. You get a whole bunch at the Hamfest, or maybe you're actually at the Hamfest and checking tubes out. And if you do that, and I suggest you do check out your tubes, because there are some tube guys out there that are, well, less than honest. Remember, take your butter knife or your pocket knife. Be careful with opening the boxes. Nothing gets a tube dealer angrier than a box that gets ripped open by a gorilla. But these few tips that I just gave you, well, I hope you can use them, because you can weed out a lot of used tubes, because so many people, especially the TV and repair shops back in the 60s and 70s, they'd often slip in back in used tubes into new boxes, and there were some guys that actually tried selling them back and did indeed sell them back as new tubes. And, you know, we like new tubes. Sometimes used tubes are okay, but if you got a box and you think it's new, it should be new. All right, well, hope you can use these tips. If you like this, leave a like. Subscribe, comment, whatever. Talk to you later.